WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. I'm J.W. Simmons, your host, each and every week at 2:30 on Tuesdays. We come to you with a show that is information, education oriented. And today the education piece is a key part of what we're going to talk about because Dr. Wesley Johnson is with us, Superintendent of Clinton City Schools. Dr. Johnson, thank you for coming in, sitting down. You've been a guest here before, and we appreciate your commentary and insight into what's going on in the world of public education. I want to kind of start today with, somewhat of an observation. Looking at some of our past conversations and looking at your involvement in public education, which has included teacher, principal, assistant superintendent, multiple roles in the county system, now superintendent of Clinton City Schools. In 2018, fall of 2018, I'm sure you remember that well, you stepped up into the position that you're in now. Shortly, in fact, just a few months, 2 or 3 months after that, we started going into this world that ultimately ended up into a world of COVID. You've had probably in your introductory years of education, particularly as a superintendent, one of the most, and I'll use this word mildly, interesting leadership roles. How has it worked out? I mean, what have you discovered? What has COVID taught you in your journey as a superintendent?
Wow, that's a really good question, Mr. JW. I think more than anything is that you can't be in this job alone. When you are working as a superintendent, and I know you and I talked about this off air a little earlier, you're representing a community. You're representing a community of individuals from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. And so you really have to put your thoughts and your opinions aside, and you really have to rely on the opinions and thoughts of others. And so when I became superintendent of Clinton City School System, I became a dark horse. My kids are dark horses. My wife's a dark horse, and we really wanted to embed ourselves in this community. Of course, we moved here, we started going to church here, and then you just start talking to people. You start getting involved in things such as we talked about Rotary earlier, Kiwanis, and you're involved in these organizations so you can get an idea of how your community feels about things, and you kind of engross yourself in the community. One of the things I've been able to do as superintendent that I think is very important is to stay very engrossed in my schools. Clinton City School Superintendent, although we only have 4 or 5 schools, they're all a little different and unique. And so I try to stay in my schools pretty much daily. And so I get in there and I'm getting to see the teachers teach and having conversations with our custodians and our cafeteria workers and our bus drivers. And I go to all the bus driver meetings just so that you can meet and greet everyone. And we really have tried to have Clinton City Schools to become more of a family-like atmosphere. I think more important than anything as superintendent in any type of leadership position is to surround yourself with good people. So every time there's an opportunity to bring in someone, you look and see who you have, this next up, in Clinton City Schools, and you try to find someone that's going to fit the mold. We have been able to hire some really good people. You and I talked earlier about the Board of Education and how we have a Board of Education that's unique and diverse. But I've had the great luxury of having the same board chair for 3 years, and her being a former teacher and principal, and all the way up to assistant and associate superintendent in Clinton City Schools has really helped me as well to gain a foothold on the things that have the history of Clinton City Schools, and she's given me a unique perspective that's assisted me. Now getting into the COVID, really, like I said, depending on others to help and guide and steer the ship. One of the things that I get to do each and every Monday is I meet with my executive cabinet. My executive cabinet are individuals from human resources, curriculum and instruction, facilities, technology, finance. And so they have a good perspective as well, and they give me, things to think about as we make decisions. So I don't go into this thing making decisions alone. It's a combination of talking to your principals, talking to your staff, talking to your Board of Education, your executive cabinet, and trying to do what's right for all.
The interesting part, and this I think comes through oftentimes as I hear you talking, it seems like I hear it coming through now, is that COVID has kind of set a new direction in not only what you process, how you process it, but basically how you interpret it and dispense it. And I say that for an example. I was talking with some folks and we're saying, well, now what COVID's done is the kid that's at home, that all of a sudden parents don't have a job and all these kinds of things now has changed the dynamic going forward. Is the expectation, has it changed what your expectation and role is and what the Clinton City Schools is doing? Have you had to look at kind of redirecting that as you, and I'm saying that from the reality that you've been out for so many months and out of class learning and virtual learning, and what has all that done to the learning process?
It's made it unique, that's for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that when I started the job as an educator 23 years ago that we would have ever considered that there would have been students that would have been on virtual instruction for an entire year. Now, Clinton City Schools made a bold move last year. We made a bold move by starting at our K-2 schools 5 days a week. But we did give parents the option to remain remote or virtual if that was their choice at that time, because of course at that time there wasn't a lot that was known about COVID and we were still learning it. And so it was very important to ensure that everyone felt comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so as the more and more research came out about COVID, we were able to get our 3-5 school back first. And then again, some more time went by, and then our governor felt a little more easy to allow our middle schools and high schools to start coming back. So that was around March, April. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it was very interesting and unique to think about kids being virtual, having your teachers to have to teach the in-person kids as well as the virtual kids. And the work that they did last year was just phenomenal. To think about them. Some of our teachers, especially at the middle school and high school, had both sets. They had students that they were teaching virtually. They had students that they were teaching face-to-face, and being able to do that and accommodate that, it was just astounding. And so I thank them. I think our principals, our teachers, our staff, our custodians, everyone, and to even think about cleanliness mm-hmm. and disinfecting. And, mm-hmm. We had to have professional development for disinfecting things. I mean, again, you wouldn't have thought about that, 5 years ago, not even 23 years ago when I started. So it's all been unique. It's all been a different perspective. I mean, we were moving toward one-to-one instruction. We were trying to get the opportunity that, technology is very important in today's world, and we were teaching that way, but we had to go one-to-one and remote at the drop of a hat, come March 13th, 2020. I think that day will live in infamy, I guess, to think about it. But it's been a great year. We've learned a lot. I think as we hopefully we thought we were mm-hmm. getting near to the end of COVID, and we've seen recently that the trends are spiking back a little more, mm-hmm. and so we don't really know what to expect. But my goal and to get to this year, my theme for this year is going to be making the main thing the main thing. And what I mean by that is we want to get back that every board meeting or every faculty meeting, we're not starting out with COVID discussions the very first thing. We want to get back to talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic, the things that we were put on this planet to do, is to be educators and to teach the future generations. And so that's kind of what my theme is for this year, is making the main thing, and that's getting back to the basics.
Of those things that you learned, that as you mentioned, folks went home, they were virtually taught, is an example, but there was other things that I'm sure you learned during the COVID thing. Of those things, what will you continue to use going forward? Another way of putting it, what changed that was positive during COVID?
Right. That's a great question. I think one of the things is that people's time is so important. We would schedule meetings. We would have these expectations that these meetings would take place. And for years, those meetings always had to be in face-to-face. I mean, you and I were talking about Rotary earlier and how we now had a virtual option for Rotary. And so when we think about meetings and we think about having to drive to Raleigh to have this professional development, or to drive to, just like the other day, I drove to Morehead City to sit in a meeting. Zoom has changed that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so we can do professional development virtually. Like I've got a professional development lined up with a gentleman from NCDPI for the new principal executive standards. And, 2 years ago, we'd have had him come down from Raleigh. Somebody would have had to pay his travel, his mileage, and we would have paid him a stipend to be here at Clinton City Schools. Well, now we just do it by Zoom. And it's just, I'm not going to say it's just as effective, but it's very close to being just as effective. So, thinking about meetings and thinking about our beginning teacher meetings, our after school meetings, we've done all of those virtually. And so if someone has to go home to take care of a child, they can take care of their child and have the child on their lap, and we can still have a professional conversation through Zoom.
Are you doing any board meetings virtually as well? Have you done that?
We started out, of course, with COVID early on, and all of our meetings were virtually. We still have the ability to conduct them virtually. We're not allowing visitors into our buildings right now, just faculty and staff. We will start the school year this year. Again, looking at numbers, we will start the school year by allowing parents in our buildings. We did not allow parents in our buildings at all last year, but we will start the school year with parents in our buildings. But yeah, absolutely. And so, repeat that question to me. I'm sorry, JW.
Does this board, or has the board met virtually?
We did it first, as I said, but we moved away from that. All of our outside visitors are virtual. And so anyone that would like to attend the meeting, they can get on and listen to it virtually.
Right.
But right now, we're still having face-to-face meetings.
Which I think has been a big step forward, one would say, in many board meetings, to include commissioners and school boards and others. Historically, you would have to go attend a meeting. Now folks can just log in. When we come back from this break, I want to kind of get into a little bigger conversation about the COVID impact now going forward versus in the past.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Dr. Wesley Johnson, Clinton City Schools Superintendent, about some folks would say the most important thing to you, that's your children and how they're educated. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. Again, my name is J.W. Simmons. I'm your host. We're pleased to be bringing you a show today. This particular show is about education, which is kind of at the core of a lot of folks' conversation this time of the year. Dr. Wesley Johnson, Superintendent of Clinton City Schools, is with us. Dr. Johnson, we go through this every year in August in preparation, making sure the kids has got all the tools they need in their toolbox and all that kind of thing to go back to school, making sure that whatever we get from the superintendent's office that they need, that either the parents get it or the grandparents get it, and they get a nice little bag and hopefully a book sack, and they're ready to go. This year it's a little bit different because as we sit here and talk today, we've just recently discovered now that the governor has said we got a whole new, quote, variant called Delta. We thought we were beyond the whole COVID thing, but this Delta thing now has statistically seems to have changed the numbers, apparently radically, because there's some urgent need that we even consider doing everything from shutting down and otherwise. What do you think, or how does it work with Clinton City Schools as you look at whatever changes here at the last minute? Because I'm sure that you guys had everything pretty much planned out based on what you knew in May and June and July. And now all of a sudden, in the last, seemed like week, everything's turned upside down again. Tell us, what do you think? What do we need to look at as parents or grandparents for our kids going back to school?
Well, as I stated earlier, what we wanted to start the school year with thinking about was making the main thing, and that being reading, writing, and arithmetic, and trying to get our students prepared for what transpired last year, and having all of our students back in the building 5 days a week. And we were, we have already stated in a board meeting multiple times that we were removing the remote learning option. We wanted all kids back in the building 5 days per week. But you're right. I mean, one of the things that we have to do as superintendent and as citizens, and I'm a dad of 3 myself, we have to consider the data and the research that's continuing to emerge in regards to Delta. The numbers have not looked good in North Carolina over the last several days. One of the things that we continue to do, and we have been doing since March of 2020, is we look, as I talked to you earlier about our executive cabinet meetings every Monday, that's my number 2 item. We always start with good news. You got to start with good news, number 1. But number 2 is the North Carolina COVID update. We've been very lucky to have a great working relationship with our local health department. We have frequent conversations with them. We already have a meeting scheduled with them for next week. And we just keep each other engrossed in the conversation to how we can best serve our community and best serve our students and keep them as safe as possible. Thinking about this next school year, it's going to be interesting. I don't know, Mr. JW, if I can answer that question right now. I mean, because we're still a couple weeks away from school. We just ended our summer learning program, which was extremely successful. Yesterday was actually our last day. And we had many students that were back in school. We had 16 seniors who had not earned graduation credit. And as of 2 days ago, 15 of those 16 have since graduated. And I believe the last one was on track to graduate. We've had a lot of credits that were earned from students who had lost credit due to COVID situations and not being able to, really focus on their studies a lot. But this Delta's kind of thrown us all for a loop. I think I read today that someone said it was as contagious as chickenpox.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then I also read today that it's possible that vaccinated individuals are spreading Delta as well. And so we don't, that's the thing about COVID, is that we're continuing to learn. And so I think as educated individuals as we are, it's important that we stay educated. It's important that we go out and search for the research. It's important that we stay well read in regards to what others are doing around us. And it's also important, as I stated earlier, to look at your community. What is your community makeup? What is your community looking at doing? Because of course Clinton is a lot different than Durham. It's a lot different than Asheville. It's a lot different than Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And we have to look at what our community makeup is. Not that we're going to make any decisions that are going to be or jeopardize health and safety, but we do have to think about how our community looks at things and feels about things when we're making these important decisions.
What are you getting from Raleigh as far as their expectations? What is some of the things that you're expecting it'll be part of that toolkit that's coming from Raleigh?
That's a great question. And of course, we talked about the toolkit. The Strong Schools Toolkit is updated from guidance from everyone, but primarily the guidance from the NCDHHS, who primarily follows guidance from the CDC. There was a wonderful collaborative that was put together called the ABC Collaborative, and it was researchers and doctors from Duke University and UNC Chapel Hill. And every school that was in Plan A last year, which was basically school back either 4 or 5 days per week, we had to share our data on quarantining, on individuals that were COVID positive. We had to share that with the ABC Collaborative. And so the ABC Collaborative was able to find that of all of the COVID mitigation strategies, that masking was really the only one that was shown to be statistically significant in reducing COVID outbreak. So all the stuff in the toolkit about sanitation and cleanliness, and a lot of that's been removed. And it really says that in general, cleaning done once per day, it's exactly the way it's worded in there, is usually good enough. Now, that's not going to change what we're going to do in Clinton City Schools. We're going to continue to have wipes available for all of our kids, for our teachers, for our faculty and staff, for our bus drivers, to wipe down areas that are heavily visited each and every day. But a lot of those things have been removed. But the biggest thing, of course, is with the masking. And, the word is K-12 schools should require, and that was just changed the other day. Last week it was K-8 schools should require, and 9-12 schools can allow vaccinated individuals to go maskless. Well, then that was updated, I believe, on July 22nd. You get to July 29th, we get information from the CDC that changes the stance of the governor, the NCDHHS, and so now it's back to school districts, K-12, should require masking. And so, of course, you've got different districts considering many different things in regards to the masking. But social distance has been, it's been changed now. They're using a different word. They're calling it physical distancing now. And the physical distancing has gone down from 6 feet to 3 feet, all based on the research from the ABC Collaborative. So there have been a lot of changes. And that's why it's important to, as I said earlier, to continue to research and continue to follow the science, continue to be well read, and to continue to stay invested in what's going on, around the state and our nation.
As superintendent, I know you've always been very much and very aggressively involved in making sure that parents are aware of what's happening and engaging them in the process. How hard has it been on you, not only during COVID, but particularly now, as all of these changes are starting to occur, and now all of a sudden the governor's back on, and we watch that, and more changes seem to be coming, and it's almost like weekly. So, for example, whatever we're talking about now, a week or two from now may have changed to some degree. So how hard is it for you as superintendent and leader of the public schools here in Clinton, North Carolina, to make sure that your parents are all kind of getting the most recent and accurate information?
Wow, that's another good question, Mr. JW. We have some resources that are available to us, thankfully, through call messaging, and we can get a call out very quickly. Of course, we try to use our website to keep our community updated. In COVID, we learned a lot, getting back to your earlier question, that you have to use all available resources. Some individuals may not feel as free to answer the phone call because you never know who's calling, when you see those numbers pop up on your phone. But one of the things that we learned is that we can use apps and different things, to keep our community updated basically every few minutes. And so we've kind of had to work with our principals and our teachers. And we have some principals. I'm thinking of one in my head right now, Greg Dirks, who has really bought into the philosophy of Instagram and Facebook and social media to keep his community updated. And he even does it for very positive, good news. And so, you really got some ways. But I think the best way is just good old face-to-face. One of the things that has changed in Clinton City Schools is open house. So we used to have open house that was a traditional 4 to 7 time. Well, with COVID, you asked me this earlier, what's a positive thing that you're going to keep? Well, Mr. Dirks had found out that he really liked having the individual meetings. And so last year he had 2 days for open house, and he had his teachers to schedule a time for JW to come out with JW's child and to meet the teacher and have, a conversation. Now it's physically or socially distanced apart, but you're getting to meet the person instead of them coming in and you're running and having a quick conversation while you got 5 or 6 other people waiting at the door. And so Mr. Dirks is going to continue that for this school year. He's going to have scheduled meetings. All parents will come in, have an opportunity for about a 20 to 30 minute meeting with the teacher. You can talk about all of the things as they get ready. And of course, that's very important at Greg's school because Greg is a pre-K kindergarten principal, and it's the first time they've experienced school. Then you throw in the COVID aspect, and everybody's a little nervous about sending their child to school for the first time, but then you throw in their COVID, it makes it a lot more difficult.
And I think what I hear you saying too is Greg's very aware that that's the most important thing in the parents' world, and should be is that child and what's best for that child. And I know a little bit about his background, and that's huge for him to be sitting down talking to that patient with parents.
Absolutely.
I was looking at his military record. He's been out there, and his expectations is way up here. So anyway, we're going to continue this conversation when we come back from break, and I'd like to kind of get into a little bit of this idea of some of the fundamental things that is part of the world that is that education is trying to accomplish, that continues to go on even though these COVID things are happening. So I'd love to kind of get into that with the next segment.
Sounds great.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment. We're talking about education, all those things related to that with the superintendent of Clinton City Schools, Dr. Wesley Johnson. Call a friend. Stay tuned.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Dr. Wesley Johnson. The name of the show is We Should Know. My name is J.W. Simmons. I'm your host. I want to welcome you back today. Dr. Johnson, we've talked about a number of issues about halfway through the show here. It seems that when we look at where education is and what we're doing is that we've discovered that a lot of the rigors and structure of education has been rattled to some degree, and we've been forced to modify, to change. When I look at the mission of Clinton City Schools, it says our mission is to educate all students to their highest level of academic performance, to support them socially, emotionally, and to prepare them to become a productive and contributing members of a modern society. Has the mission been rattled any, or is the mission still on track?
I think the mission's still on track. I mean, when I hear that mission, I was smiling the whole time you were reading.
It's a great statement.
When you were reading it, because, when I came to Clinton City Schools, one of the things that we worked to do was to fine-tune our mission, our vision, and our core values.
This was done as part of your input, too.
Yes, it was.
I might add.
But I would say, Mr. J.W., that the thing that was most important with that is that it wasn't just my input, that it was input from the entire faculty and staff. And so we had a meeting. I shared what a mission statement was. I can see the PowerPoint right now that I did, but we sent that back to our principals, and our principals talked to their staff members, and ultimately we just slightly tweaked the mission statement, because I think the mission of school districts for many years, probably dating back to when we started this great country, was to educate our citizenry and get them to be productive citizen and community members. So often, we're going to have individuals that leave Clinton and do great things, and that's perfect. But we're going to have many that stay right here in this great town and do wonderful things for the town of Clinton. And so that's what we really strive to do, is make them wonderful, contributing community members that are civic minded. And of course, we do have to think about their social emotional development. I think that was one of the things that we added to the mission statement, because social emotional matters have become so important. I mean, we're right here in the midst of the Olympics, and we think about the great gymnast the other day that, socially, emotionally, she just needed to take some time away. And so it's so important that there's so many pressures on these young people and on us as individuals, to live up to a certain standard, that social emotional education has become vital. And that was one of the things that was tweaked. So I would say it has tweaked a little bit, but that we're still focused on educating our citizenry and to make them wonderful contributing members of a great community.
Well, you just touched on exactly one of the reasons I wanted to read that, was that those two words that was in there, socially and emotionally, which is now a big part of the conversation for education, how, emotionally stable is our students, and how is it affecting the social dynamic of what's happening around them. And one of the things that comes to mind is something I'm sure you're probably familiar with is House Bill 324, and looking at revising this whole idea of what is referred to as ensuring dignity and non-discrimination in schools. Two words seem to be, there's different meaning, but you hear a lot. And one of them is a familiar word, and that's equality. But the other word that's now being infused, which has a different meaning, is called equity. What does that mean to an educator like you, from not only your experience in classroom, but your now experience as superintendent? Where does equity now become part of the verbal play, in some cases even more than equality?
Well, I think equity is important. I think it's fundamental when you think of our great country, America, and many of us being, not indigenous to this country. I mean, we were, many of us were brought here, and so it's very important that we think about America as being a melting pot, and that we want individuals to feel valued and respected. And we talked about this a little bit, actually, off air earlier. And equity is very part of my core. And so one of the things that I had the opportunity to do as an educator was be a part of Hopton High School when we were going through a dramatic change in our demographics. And it's kind of interesting because now in Clinton, we're seeing some of those same changes. And we have more and more students that are coming to us that are Hispanic and different nationalities. And so we've got to value everyone. And it's not that anyone has to lose their, that's where little people get kind of confused on equity. We're not asking anyone to lose their personal beliefs or feelings, but it's just to have respect for everyone and to all cultures, and to feel that everyone can be a value to our community, and to take everybody's thoughts and beliefs and opinions and to consider them and to be respectful to everyone, I think is really what the kind of the definition of equity should be.
Teachers learn how to teach. They go and receive academic credentials. They get, quote, state certifications to teach. In the continued learning part of a teacher, as that teacher goes through the years of learning, is this something that's addressed in their, not necessarily recertification, but their learning cycle? Because let's face it, we've just been talking about how much we've learned just in the past 18 months. And so teachers have to be willing to learn as they continue to go through the cycle of teaching, and not just get stuck in turn to page 4, read sentence 5, that kind of thing. Do we do enough of that for teachers?
I would say in general, and in many districts, the answer to that question is no. Thankfully, being a part of Sampson County Schools for a long time, we had the opportunity to join with Panasonic, and we started a group called The Force. And The Force was primarily working with, at that time, Sampson County Schools, Pender County Schools, Duplin County Schools, and Jones County Schools, and it was entirely about equity. Of course, the demographics of those 4 districts were drastically changing, and we wanted to ensure that everyone was respected and valued, and that everyone, felt a part of the school system. And then when I moved from Sampson County Schools to Clinton City Schools, I tried very, very diligently to get Clinton City Schools involved in the force work. But it took a while, but ultimately they allowed us to come in. And so we got into the force group, and we were working with Panasonic and East Carolina and some other organizations to learn all about equity, and then COVID happened. And so it's kind of reshifted and readjusted. But when you think about equity and you talk about, those decisions have to guide our actions. And so we think about, like I talked about earlier, the remote learning piece. Yeah, we had to. Equity was all built into that because we had to be equitable for all. Some individuals didn't want to come back to school. They didn't feel that it was safe. And so, of course, you had to give them an opportunity for the remote education aspect, while others wanted to be in school. And so all of that is a basis for all the decisions we make. But I think in general, the answer to that question is no, but we've worked really hard to make it a basis for most of our decisions here in Clinton City.
Do you think sometimes that when we look at both of those words, equity and equality, that oftentimes folks get confused because they look at equality and say, well, the Constitution says, basically everybody's created equal and you're supposed to have equal opportunity and that kind of thing. But equity takes a complete different, not different stance, but a different kind of approach in the sense of making sure that everybody gets to the racetrack to have an equal opportunity to run the race. So there's a little bit of variance there. The challenge I'm hearing seems that there's a sense that if you have a certain ability to achieve and you've accomplished so many things in the world that somehow you should give that to somebody else. And that's not what I'm hearing that equity is.
That's true.
I think it's getting confused, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm trying to see if we can help maybe set the record straight with some of that.
Right. No, I think that's great. And there's all kinds of little pictures that kind of bring that point home. Mm-hmm. I think the one that I've seen that kind of brings it home to me the most is a bike. Mm-hmm. So when you think of a bike, there's different size bikes. Mm-hmm. And so of course, I got 3 children myself, mm-hmm. and they're all different ages. I've got a 10th grader, an 8th grader, and now a 2nd grader. My 2nd grader can't ride my 10th grader's bike. Mm-hmm. That's equality. Yeah. I buy them a bike. I buy them the same bike. It's exactly the same. It's a 26-inch Huffy.
Yeah.
If I put my little girl on a 26 Huffy,
not good.
It's not good.
No.
So you have to get her a bike for her.
Exactly.
And that's what equity is.
Exactly.
It's that we're creating opportunities for all. You don't buy everybody the same bike. You get everybody a bike, but you make the bike available for them. And so in that same picture, it showed someone who maybe was disabled. Mm-hmm. You can't buy a bike for a disabled person. Absolutely. Maybe they don't. Their legs have been amputated, so they might need a bike that's that they can use their arms to move the bike. So
equity becomes the reality of just the opportunity for them to get into the classroom, which is exactly what we're trying to explain to everybody. And I think that sometimes it gets folks off on the wrong discussion because of the way it was just thrown out. Is that now we're looking at equity, but it's not a challenge to people that has succeeded, in my opinion. It almost is a compliment to those achievements.
Absolutely. And it's great that we're having this conversation, mm-hmm. Because you're right. When most people think, we actually did a little survey of our staff and we asked them what equity meant. And not most everyone, but a lot of people said equity means equal.
Yeah, and it's completely not necessarily the opposite, but it's another channel over here,
Right.
So I think we're there, and again, this is one of those things we're fixing to go to break, but that's one of those things that we could probably do a whole show on, just discussing that and getting different people's opinions and their direction on it. But I want to kind of prepare for a break now, and in doing that, kind of set this so folks will understand. I want to come back, and this will be our last segment when we come back. So I'm going to come back and try to hit you with some of the key points that has been discussed in North Carolina that are concerns for education going forward in 2021, 2022. And just kind of get your opinion on that if that'll work.
Sounds great.
All right, we'll be back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned, call a friend. We're talking about education and various aspects of that.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us over the past few years. And this month, the month that this show is airing, is our 11th year doing We Should Know. Started out at WCLN Radio. Now we're Star Communications TV. For the past few years, been doing this and simulcast on radio. It's one of those things that seems to have worked out, I guess, for my life, and I really appreciate you guys continuing to send us information about what you think. You've been a big part of this show and advising us on what you want to hear and more content from different people, and we've been encouraging those folks to come to the studio and talk to us, and it's worked out quite well. With that said, please continue to send us your email to weshouldknow, edu@gmail.com. That's weshouldknow, edu@gmail.com. clintoncidschools.com. If you choose to drop us a letter or a note or a postcard, send that to Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. That's 28328, Post Office Box 1482. And we look forward to talking to you. As I see folks out in the community, many times folks will ask me a question or say, hey, have you thought about having so-and-so? Or I appreciate, the comments that the superintendent had or somebody else that we've had recently on the show. And I appreciate you letting us know that you're listening to that, either on the radio or Star Communications TV Channel 16. So let's continue our conversation today with Superintendent of Clinton City Schools. And Dr. Wesley Johnson, you've had a momentous task since 2018, being superintendent of the school system that's going through and has gone through a huge shutdown with COVID, and you've faced a lot of challenges. If you wanted to, as I was saying back in the West, to notch your gun, you could put 2 or 3 notches on that of things that you've actually had to accomplish. I want to kind of hit some highlights, and this information comes from Ed NC. I know you've probably looked at that many times, but some of the things that they list is key areas of concern going forward, and one of them is what you alluded to a while ago, which is, and we talked a little bit about it in the ethics, not only ethics, but the equity part, and that's access, broadband access. That's kind of a part of that equity piece as well, as people having access to education. Do you feel like that broadband, it's being addressed on the national level? Of course, here in Sampson and surrounding counties, Bladen, Star Communications is spending huge dollars to make sure people are connected. How do you feel, and what do you look like at Clinton City Schools? Are all of your students pretty much where they can access broadband?
Well, I'm glad you said Star because we've had a lot of help from Star, and being in Clinton, of course, we have a lot of great supporters of our community, supporters of our school system. Our school system has been in place for a long time, and so a lot of people value the dark horses in Clinton High School and Clinton City Schools. But so Star has definitely assisted us. We were able to prop up almost immediately broadband access at all of our locations. And so at all of our schools, we had internet feeds that were available in our parking lots. And so we were able to send the devices home, and for our individuals that didn't have internet, they could go and sit in the parking lot and have internet. Now that's not, great for everyone. So we looked at different things that we could do, and we propped up some internet boxes at some of our at our housing communities. And so that was great too. Star helped us with that as well. And then we had Smithfields was able to work with us to get some hotspots, and we were able to, get those home and out to our students. And we had great help from Smithfield. We had other groups that were involved with the hotspot distribution. So at one time when we were having this conversation initially, I think I told John Lowe, who's my executive director of technology and facilities, we're going to need 200 hotspots. Well, we quickly learned we needed about 5 times that amount. But everyone stepped up to the plate, and when we ended this past school year, we had over 1,000 hotspots, and I think that we had only paid for like 200. And so the vast majority of them had come from, supporters of Clinton City Schools and other national organizations like T-Mobile. And T-Mobile has a big thing that they do with broadband access, and Sprint. We had some Sprint ones as well. And so it was just fantastic to have a lot of assistance from our community.
I just sitting here listening to you explain that, and it just speaks so strongly to the resiliency of communities and community input. You don't have to have a lot of big industry, but your local community will step up and make a difference when it's called on.
Well, I'm glad you used that word. In fact, I thought about using that word earlier, but I think resiliency is so important. When you go back to an earlier question, what have I learned? I've learned that the community is resilient, that our nation is resilient, that people are resilient. When we're thrown these issues that we don't even know how to deal with, we don't necessarily once we learned something about it, at first we were all very intimidated of COVID. And of course, the lockdown and things that were put in place. But as we've learned, we've become resilient with it, and we've learned to live with it. And if it's putting a mask on your face, or if it's doing other things, we're doing great as a community to rebound. I think that somebody told me recently, I read, that we had one of the greatest economic investments and infusions in North Carolina during the 2020 year. Who would have thought that with all the shutdown? But, we were resilient as a group. I mean, we think about our agricultural economy and how it just prospered, throughout COVID. And it's just very important that we have such a resilient community that's ready to tackle these challenges. And I think that's vital.
Absolutely. The other thing I was thinking it was important looking at what's happening was, and this is part of some of those 10 highlighted areas, is the flexibility for local school districts to do certain things that what might work in Clinton City Schools might not work in downtown Charlotte. So how important has that flexibility been? And do you need more flexibility?
Well, yeah. And so, of course, that's what's being broadcast from every area possible right now. Catherine Truitt, our state superintendent, is a huge supporter of local flexibility. And we've seen that with the Strong Schools NC Toolkit. We've seen a lot of flexibility that we're allowing local LEAs to make decisions about returning to school and masking, and we're seeing a lot of flexibility with that. I think that is vital, especially when you get into the budgeting pieces of school. I mean, although we don't talk about it a lot, schools are multi-million-dollar organizations a lot of times, and they're having to make difficult decisions about how to spend their money. I was actually talking to Dr. Gooden recently. He's the new superintendent in Sampson County Schools. He thinks the way that we do business here in North Carolina is a little odd. And I said, well, give me an example. He said, well, in Pennsylvania, if you have we'll just take Clinton City, we're about $30 million. He said, they just send you $30 million and say, do school. But in North Carolina, you get allotments for teachers, and right. you get this so much for Title I, and this so much, and so it's all allotted in different ways, and you really don't have a lot of flexibility. Where in a different state like that, they had ultimate flexibility. So I think local flexibility is really important because we know how to do education in Clinton. We know what the Clintonians think are important, and we try to make that as part of our strategic plan instead of someone maybe in Raleigh telling us, or someone in Charlotte, you should do this, you should do this. I mean, they guide us in those decisions, but ultimately we need to have the flexibility to make our own decisions.
One of the areas that was interesting to me is the teacher recruitment and retention. We've heard a lot about teacher pay, and I know a lot of teachers have kind of gotten frustrated with all this masking stuff and virtual. Some of them, and as you pointed out earlier, teachers has gone beyond expectations. I've been to schools during the pandemic and just observed teachers and teacher assistants standing in parking lots, doing whatever to help students. It's been amazing. Is it hard to retain those teachers? Is that a big area for you and concern?
Well, it is. The teaching profession is it's a wonderful profession, number one. I mean, I went into education as a teacher, and I really feel that all superintendents should have been teachers. I mean, because without the teachers, we can't do school. Of course, without the students, we can't do school either. So we need both. But the teaching profession, especially over the last couple of years, have been challenged with so many different things. And so especially COVID. And we had teachers, of course, that at first that had concerns, didn't want to return to the classroom because they didn't know what was going to be brought into their classroom. And so it's been very important that we've worked hard in this state to assist teaching with pay. But when you think about what our Senate has put forth recently, I believe a 3% pay over the next biennium, a 1.5% increase after what teachers have just been faced with over this last 18 months, I'm not sure that that's fair compensation. So I say we need to give teachers as much money as we can because they're the ones that really, at the end of the day, are having those direct relationships with our students.
Last question, and then I'll give you about 30 seconds or so to answer this. Parental engagement in the student's life. More, less? What are you getting enough parents involved? I know used to that was a big deal. I remember years ago, PTOs and all those kinds of things, and parents was really out there beating the doors in trying to help. What do you need to do with that, and are you satisfied with parent engagement?
I don't know that I'll ever be satisfied with parent engagement, because you need your parents too, getting back to that last section that we just talked about. But it's important that we get everyone involved, because we're all a community, and it takes a community to raise a child.
Well, we're kind of coming up here on our last segment. We're fixing to go to closure, so we got 30 seconds. If you can give me something in 10 seconds, I'll take it right now, and we'll go to close.
Love being a dark horse, love being in Clinton. We love our community, and whatever we can do to assist our students, our parents, and our teachers, and our staff, we're there to do it.
Well said. I want to thank you for being with us today, and I want to thank you for doing the job you're doing, and all those people that serve on the school boards for us, elected and otherwise, I think should be given a salute. It's a tough job during this time. So thank you for what you do, and look forward to having you back soon, because we just touched on a few of the topics, as you well know. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again next week right here on We Should Know. And as we close and go to close today, we always like to say, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.